everyone. Welcome back to Moments Peace. Today, I have a special guest, my good friend, Janet. We are going to talk about the gifted child. So, hello, Janet.
Hello.
Thank you so much again for being here with me. So, today we want to talk about the gifted child. It is hard to identify, sometimes easy. And I've asked you because your kids are very intelligent. You have one who's studying philosophy, like major with his PhD, and he can memorize like books of the Bible, not just chapter or verses, but like books. And, all of them have scored really well. They've gone to college. Abby was top of her class in nursing school. They have great study habits. They're great communicators. They're champions for speech and debate.
Wow, you make my kids sound great.
You have a lot. And it's not with a lot of hard work, but, that they're very gifted. You have one who we don't know, maybe has a photogenic memory and he's really good with math. And I think that's, for name's sake, we won't call it, but that they're all really intelligent inside, to the point where some of our friends are like, what did you do when you were pregnant? Like, did you play Mozart?
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Jeannie or I are like, what did she do? We don't know. But we want to talk about it because it is something that can be kind of controversial when it comes to like kids finishing early and should they go to college because, they're academically advanced or, not overshadowing also the emotional intelligence or spiritual aspect of it. So I would just like to dive in on all of that.
Well, to answer your question about what I did when I was pregnant, this is pretty funny. I did eat a lot of protein when I was pregnant with the twins, but then I had like only chocolate milkshakes with my fourth and fifth. I think the entire pregnancy. So no protein. And so I don't think that made a difference.
So they just, I guess, naturally get it from God, you and your husband.
I don't know. My husband's pretty bright. So
that is true. He is very, very smart. So I guess that gene is just.
I'm more street smart than he is. We joke about this. I've got more common sense than he does, but he's the genius of the two of us for sure.
That's the same here. Yeah. I'm like, I know how to, well, we won't go there, but I'm definitely the street smart side, and then my husband's like way smarter. Right. But, so how would let's start with resources. Like what resources did you read and, that were parenting books that might have helped you navigate, and how did you challenge a kid that is gifted?
Well, it's funny that you asked this because I didn't ever really identify my kids as gifted. So I didn't read any books about gifted children. I just read books about parenting and books about homeschooling. But I would say now that I have 5 kids, I would say that the biggest marker for an academically gifted child is a good memory, like a really good memory. You mentioned my oldest child was memorizing entire books of the Bible and reciting them, and that was just his thing. And I don't think I realized. Okay, this is kind of funny. He hated school. He hated homeschooling. When he was in middle school, and it was time for us to do school together, homeschool, he would fuss and whine because he wanted to keep playing Legos. He didn't want to stop what he was doing. My daughter, on the other hand, would, oh, it's time to do school. And she'd come and sit primly at the table, ready to, with her pencils out. And he was over there on the floor having a tantrum. And so I used to say to my husband, he is, he's just going to flip burgers at McDonald's. That's all he's going to do because he doesn't like to read books. He didn't like to read books. I would buy my daughter, the Laura Ingalls Wilder set. She would devour it. And when can I get another book, Mommy? And he was like, I don't want to read a book. I just want to play with my Legos and I want to watch TV. And so he ended up he's the one who's now pursuing a PhD in philosophy.
Right.
If you had told me that when he was 12, I don't know what I would have done. I wouldn't have believed it. I would not have believed it. And so the first time I think I realized that he had an amazing memory was when for school one year, we decided we were going to memorize Philippians 2. And he was like, we have to memorize a whole book of the Bible? And because he didn't like to work. And I was like, yep, we're going to do it together and it's going to be okay. Well, long story short, we memorized the whole book. And he thought that was super cool. So he comes to me later and he's like, wow, I memorized the whole book of the Bible. Would it be okay if I memorized Philippians 1? And I'm like, sure. Go ahead. He ended up memorizing the entire book. It's 4 chapters, the entire book of Philippians. And then he was so tickled with himself. And honestly, at this point in his life, it was pride, I think. And I think he would tell you the same thing. He started memorizing other books of the Bible. And then he eventually went on to longer books of the Bible. And it was then I think we realized, wow, he's got a good memory. And he was our first, the twins were first, so we didn't have anything to compare it to. Then the other thing that happened was we joined a co-op, and other teachers recognized in him that he was gifted, whereas I would not have recognized that in him, So um, the other thing that happened was in high school when we joined the co-op, we discovered that the reason he never read books, because I was always giving him fiction.
Mm,
I was giving him, the Chronicles of Narnia and Tolkien and even just fun fiction books. He was not interested, but he loves nonfiction to this day. He is a nonfiction, and that's unusual. I think most
right.
kids devour fiction. And we just didn't know. And so he started devouring these living books. It was a Charlotte Mason co-op that we did. And so there's a high emphasis on living books. And he loved these nonfiction books. And that's when we realized he loves to read. I mean, he reads and he writes.
Mm.
He's published multiple things. And again, if you had told me this when he was 12, I would have just fallen out of my chair, I'm sure. So I think a good memory. And then others, my other children also, some more than others, have very, very good memories. I do not. Anyone can tell you, my friends, close friends, I do not have a good memory, especially long-term memory. I don't remember things well at all, but my husband does. He
Mm.
remembers things about my life that I can't recall. He'll say, "No, don't you remember you did that in 2012?" I'm like, "I did." So I think that that's part of how you identify it for sure.
And so once you realize this
Mhm.
is, how do you challenge them
Yeah.
and encourage them? And
Yeah.
then we'll talk about the flip side of that.
Okay.
So, 'cause-
So, I guess you just have to look for ways to challenge them. The thing that really challenged my kids the most, and they would all tell you was the most beneficial thing they did in high school, was speech and debate.
Mm,
And so, those who have those really sharp minds and good memories, particularly debate,
mm,
is so sharpening and challenging to them. It takes the skills that they already have and it really hones them and gives them a platform to exercise them as well. And so all of my kids would tell you that their experience doing impromptu speaking in particular, and debate are the things that really helped to challenge them and just bring them to the next level, ready for college and beyond. So,
so one thing I didn't mention earlier is that Noah also was like one of the finalists on the National Bible Bee.
oh yeah,
That's right, in like 2016.
yes,
Yes. So that
yes,
memorizing of the scripture really did come in
it
handy
did.
at
Yes,
that
yeah,
point.
he got a pretty good scholarship from that too.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was
Yeah,
awesome. Like, I just remember that. I'm like, he put that to work
he
for
did.
him.
Well, if you're
So
going to memorize all that scripture, you might as well
yes.
get some
Money
some
for it to
cash.
get some. Yes. It was a good investment
Yeah.
for him. So one of the things we want to talk about is challenging the gifted child and recognizing that, and not,
Mhm,
we don't want to shame the fact that they can learn fast and they're quick on their feet
mhm,
and that they're good at what they are.
mhm.
The Proverbs say, is there someone skillful in their work? Do you see that they'll stand before kings? Like, literally, they'll
Yeah,
get the honor from working hard and to
yeah,
being well skilled. And obviously he put in the work to memorize
yeah.
all of that, and your other kids have. I know
Mhm.
Luke was just a champion at for speech and debate
Yeah,
for his speech and on boys, which was great.
yeah.
So
Yes.
that was a great speech. But how do you then make sure you're balancing it out for like the younger kids, or even friends that might feel like this, he's such a giant or they're such a giant, and we're like in their shadow? Like, how do you keep them going,
Yeah,
but then, I guess, keeping them humble, but
yeah,
making others not feel, you know what I'm saying?
yeah. I hate the thought of somebody feeling like they're in the shadow. I mean, um, that the younger kids all struggled with feeling like they had to fill their brother's shoes. Because my firstborn was my son especially, just because of his competitive
Nature.
awards,
Yeah.
they all felt like, well, I can never achieve that. That's him. His younger brother, my middle son Ben, would tell you that he's told this multiple times at our club that he thought winning was for this elite class of people, and he didn't fit there. He was just a normal kid.
Right.
And then he started doing well as he got older and started, working harder. He started doing well, and one day it dawned on him, oh my goodness, I'm like one of those people who wins things.
Right.
And it was this realization to him that he could do it. I can do this.
Mhm.
And so that changed his perspective, his attitude. And then he really worked hard at it. And then he did very well. He actually outperformed his brother in the competition. And then my next one came up, same thing. I think just when they're younger, they look at these older kids as um, they've got it all together and I'm just this nothing. And then same thing, he's working. And I mean, lo and behold, ends up winning this past year. That was a shock to all of us, a really fun surprise. And then Ethan's going to be in the same boat. Ethan is not my youngest. He's not as competitive as the other ones. He's just having a good time. And so I haven't sensed it from him yet. I think it's partly personality. So I don't know. We just kind of live our lives. We do our thing. I feel like the Lord put speech and debate in our family's life from a long time ago, kind of said, this is where you're going, this is what you're going to do. And it has helped them all in various ways. Um, so I'm beyond that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to say about other people feeling like they're in their shadow. I don't want anyone to feel that
Mm.
way.
Or
We are,
feeling like
yeah,
inadequate, or
yeah,
yeah. I think it's probably harder in the family dynamic more than it would be outside,
yeah,
because maybe outside people could just be like, well, I'm just going to work to get to that point,
right,
and not have like that limiting belief.
yeah,
But then I think in the family dynamic, it maybe it's more personal,
yeah, yeah.
But one thing I
Well, and
did like,
humility too is
yeah.
big. We're always saying to the kids, don't let that head get too big. Pride goeth before the fall,
Right, right.
And so that's, when they start winning, there's I think for all of us, there's a tendency to maybe think I'm all that, right?
Hmm.
But so far, I think my kids have been pretty humble about it. I mean, we make that a big deal in our house. I feel like whatever you focus on in your home
Mm,
is what they're gonna adopt. And
right.
we make a big deal about not, you don't brag to your friends. You be happy that you won,
Hmm.
celebrate that you won,
Right.
but we're not going to make that about, everything about who you are. We're not going to, make that the end all and be all. And we're going to always encourage other people,
Right.
be the cheerleader for others that they can do it.
I think that that is key, because it's the idea of like rejoice with those who rejoice. Like this is a
That's
time
right.
to
That's right.
rejoice, and maybe focus on someone else's strengths and gifting, because if
Hmm.
you are always thinking of somebody else or where you think you should be based on someone else, then you're not really walking in the path and grace and gifting
Right.
that the Lord wants you to use to
Right.
bless others.
That's
But I do like that you said that they put in the work and then they saw themselves get there.
right.
And I know personally from knowing you, your older kids have also poured into the younger ones,
They
listen,
have.
letting them, having that mentorship thing,
Right.
because there's something about your club and your family culture where you are still competitive and you celebrate that, but you're keeping that graciousness and that
Hmm.
humbleness of like, I'm going to help you be just as good
Right.
too, and I think that
Yeah.
helps too when you're so strong. I know for one of my children, they struggled a lot with spelling. I think spelling is one of the things you're either born with it or you're not.
I
Like
had
it's
one. I had one who struggled a lot.
like
Still
they
does.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, and they struggle. And then there's this other one where it's just like, it's this. Can you
Yeah.
just get it? And he's reading since he was 3, and it's
Right.
just like, here it is. And so one day he really hurt his sister's feelings because he said, well, you're in such and such grade. Shouldn't you have get there yet? And I was
Ooh,
like, everything stopped.
that's right.
Everything stopped. We had to fix that
That's
character.
right.
I had to explain everybody
Yeah.
has strength and weaknesses. This is what I think,
Yeah.
like, you've sinned. You kicked
Yeah.
your sister when she was down, and she was like looking for your help, and instead
Right.
of using that as a mentor time
Mhm.
and gracious, you you
Yeah.
killed it, man. You
We've
just
had those
beat her
conversations in our
down.
house too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now I think he's realizing like, okay, what not may not come so easily
Right.
to what comes easily to me may not for them. And
Mhm.
now I want to. And so now he's become, you know, a teacher, like a
Right.
helper.
That's
And
great.
I'm like, oh, like let's lift up, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a blessing of homeschooling is being
Mhm.
able to stop and say, that's not good. That's a
Right.
icky,
Yep.
nasty little character, thing
Mhm.
that we need to turn around because, it is arrogant to when somebody's, even if they weren't asking for your help, but even more so that they were,
Yeah.
that you are just kind of like, here it
Right.
is. And then what about this? And it's like that sting,
Mhm. Yeah, the
but
attitude matters a lot. It matters a lot. Yeah.
so I doubt you would say that definitely plays a big role in regardless of how someone might be outpacing someone based on
Oh
some type
yeah.
of measure of
Yeah, we
standard.
have to work on attitude constantly. I mean, that is I feel like homeschooling is training all of us in our attitude.
Yes, yes,
You
parents
know, our
included.
attitude should be the same as Christ Jesus.
Amen.
That's hard.
Mhm.
And for me, even as the mom, and so that's why homeschooling is so sanctifying
Yes.
for us as well as for the kids. But we talk about attitude in our house a lot and have all through the years. And how do you talk to your brother and how do you encourage him? And what you just said and what you did was it degraded him.
Mhm.
It discouraged him. You need to rethink how you did that. And sometimes we made our kids go back and redo the conversation.
Yes. Yes, when you told me
Yeah.
that, I totally stole
Yeah.
that idea and
Yeah.
started putting it I'm like, "Oh, you just cursed them. Time to come back and bless them. Come here.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
redo this,"
Yeah.
like rewind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally stole that idea from you. So,
Oh, good.
yes, thank you for that.
I'm sure I stole it from someone else. I don't remember. But my memory is so bad. I don't remember where I got it
That's
from.
true. So one of the things we have you had a child fall into academia perfection with being
A
perfection?
perfectionist?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Especially I think it's more common with gifted children. They're hard on
Yes.
themselves.
Yeah. The most surprising thing for me was we never gave our kids grades or tests at
Mm,
all the way through elementary school, all the way through middle school. And it wasn't until high school that we joined a co op and they started taking quizzes and tests. And they were desperate for an A. I only got an 89. It's not an A. Or I only got a 92. It should have been a 98. And I was stunned by that. Just how they cared so much about the grade, having never, like, we never put emphasis on that in our family. And yet, when they got to that point, they just had to have the A. Now, on the one hand, that's not I mean, you want them to do their best,
right.
but you have to balance out that okay, let's talk about what is it in your heart that wants the 98 as opposed to the 92? Like,
Right.
what is that saying about you and what your goal is and where you find your worth? And so we have had a couple of perfectionists in the family, some that I wish were more perfectionist. So we've had the gambit, but definitely the perfectionism tends to make them slow too. The ones who I
Mhm.
had that were perfectionists struggled to get with deadlines. I've got to get this done, but it has to be perfect before I turn it in,
Mhm.
and that's been a challenge too. So just constantly working on those character issues and what really matters, what's really important, what do we prioritize here? It's okay if you get a B,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So
And I would want to talk about this because this is kind of controversial. When someone is so good academically, should they automatically go to college and finish early and be one of those early college graduates?
no, no, I would say definitely not. My kids all so far have been college bound, but that's been their decision. Having boys mostly too, they all feel the burden of being the provider for the family, and they feel like they look around and think I need a college education to be able to provide. And that's true if you're going to do something like philosophy, like my one
Yes.
son.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really do that without a college education. So I really think it just depends on what their goals in life are and what they want to do. But I have a nephew who uh, went right out of high school into a welding program, and he is making bank.
Yeah.
He's married and doing very well for himself, and never had to go to college. Although I think he's taking college classes. I think his company is paying for him to take college
Mhm.
classes. I'm not sure why, but he didn't have to have that before he got the job that he did. I think the trades are very lucrative, and um, we need academic and gifted people in those areas for
Yes.
managing those things and for keeping books and for just doing excellent work. So
Yes.
I think there's absolutely room for that. We've always just let our kids decide, what do you want to do? And so far, they've all chosen college. And I suspect my youngest one will too. He's very, he loves academics, just loves to read, loves science, loves math, loves all the things. So, but I don't know for sure. He's only in ninth grade. So
Right.
we'll see. And because college is getting increasingly less affordable, I mean, if my kids hadn't gotten the scholarships they had gotten, I don't know that we could have pulled it off. So,
Right.
yeah.
So the idea of having a 15 or 16-year-old graduate and be like
Oh,
college,
no. Mm-mm.
yeah. Would you
You,
say the mental and emotional, spiritual health needs to
Oh,
be
for sure.
holistically taken?
Yes, prioritize their emotional and spiritual health for sure. Matter of fact, my middle child, who I think is very gifted, we actually held him back a year because he could have. He's an August birthday, and I said, there's no reason to push him ahead. We
Mhm.
started out with him ahead because he's like, I want to do
Yeah.
kindergarten. So we did kindergarten, but somewhere in the elementary, I forget, second or third grade, we just repeated the
Mhm.
grade. We didn't repeat
Right.
the same work, but we
Right.
just called it the same grade. And, he ended up graduating high school at almost 19.
Mhm.
He could have graduated at 18, he was perfectly capable.
Mhm.
But I was like, what's the rush?
Right.
There's no rush. And he, I think, would tell you he's glad that he did that.
Right.
And the same thing with, I mean, my youngest is very bright. I could see him if I wanted to. He could graduate at 16. I There's no way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think we would do that.
Sometimes I think we underestimate the need of the emotional, mental, spiritual
Yeah.
stuff, especially the way college campuses are today
Oh, yeah.
and our culture is today. Um, but I know that there's some parents that have allowed that, and it's like, okay, a local college
Mhm.
or like online
Mhm.
college, and that could be helpful, I think, because now you're just talking strict
Mhm.
coursework load.
Right.
But it's different when you're like trying to send them off
Yeah.
in that way, and they are younger, because I know 17-year-olds that have struggled
Mhm.
to make the adjustment. And a lot of things we don't talk about is like the suicide rate and the
Mhm.
self-harm rate and all of
Mhm.
that happens on
Yeah.
college, whether you know someone who's done it
Right.
or you yourself are plagued by those things. And so I
Right.
think some emotional intelligence and in that spirit, like being right where they need to be spiritually and
Mhm.
emotionally with their relationships and stuff like that, all kind of play a role into it. I don't think we should have that zero focus of like, it's just college, 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 the younger the better. And
Yeah.
the more, yeah, because then like you said, like who they are at 16 is not even 18,
Exactly.
and that could kind of
Yeah.
change.
Well, and the brain doesn't fully develop until the early to mid 20s. And
Yeah.
so there's no need to rush them out into the world
Hmm.
before they're ready to deal with that. And I mean, I mentioned this earlier that we send our kids to Christian. I shouldn't say we send them. So far, my kids have all chosen Christian college because we will help them
Right.
with that. Um, and I think that's so valuable. And we tell our kids, your brain is not fully developed until you're in your mid 20s. So
Right.
you want a Christian education until then, if at all possible. Um, so, but like my oldest son is right now, he's very much in secular
Yes.
environment. His master's degree in St. Louis and now his PhD is an extremely secular environment, and I'm so proud of him. He's doing well, but I think that the foundation he had in high school and through college made a huge impact on him and his ability to be able to stand strong.
Mhm. And
So,
we need strong Christian, especially Christian men,
mhm,
writing in that arena, because a lot of people don't realize that the way people look at economics and government and,
yeah,
the philosophy, or even where the public education system came from,
mhm,
all came from people's philosophy.
right.
And, you know,
Yeah.
And we saw a lot in 2020
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
philosophies coming about. So, and repeating that
Yeah.
history. So it's nice that there's someone on the front lines that loves
Yeah.
Christ and is there studying it, which I think it's hilarious. It's the same kid who was like, I'm playing with Legos.
I never could have
So,
imagined he would be an academic ever.
it's-
So it's wild that he's out there doing what he's doing.
and so does he have ambitions to basically be a professor and and
Yeah,
teach?
he wants to speak and write. Um, and so in order to do that, you have to go and teach. So,
Mhm.
and he is a wonderful teacher. I've actually heard him teach a couple classes, and I'm just, it's amazing when you watch your kids do things that you're like, wow, I
Right.
didn't know he could do that. So he's a wonderful teacher. And I just think God literally cut him out to do this thing. And we were so worried about him going to philosophy because it's an
Yeah.
extremely secular field, um, and not lucrative at all. And he
Mhm.
wanted to get married and have a family. And so we'll see. But he's killing it. We're so proud of him.
And how
Doing
much
really
longer
well.
does he have to go in his program?
Oh, probably at least 6 years for
Mm.
PhD.
So he's got a
Yeah,
while.
right.
Yeah.
We got some
Okay.
time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you would encourage a family or a mother with gifted children and the gifted child themselves? Like,
Um, I would just say always be a cheerleader, give them opportunities, but don't pressure them that they have to perform.
mm, that's good.
You know, one thing I never said to my kids was, well, you're super smart, so you need to do X. The only thing I made my kids do was debate. You're doing debate because I think that that's valuable for anybody to do. And I would tell you, you know, your kids should
It's
do it
good.
too, and anybody's kids, even if you feel like they're gifted or not. Um, but I also think there's uh, some books that are helpful, especially for those who maybe have a gifted child and then a not gifted child,
Mhm.
because that can be, like we were talking about, that could be problematic. So I'll tell you some of the best books that I read. Two of them. I'll just give you two. So the first one is called A Thomas Jefferson Education.
Yes, it's good.
Oliver DeMille. Have you read that one?
I have.
So that if I could do anything over, I would totally do that for high school, Thomas Jefferson Education. But I realized when I was reading it, we sort of did it that where
Mhm.
we had mentors kind of for our kids. But I just love that book. I love the premise of it. And so a Thomas Jefferson Education, I think if somebody read that in middle school before their kids got to high school, is very valuable. But then the other book is by Kathy Cook, and it's
Yeah.
called The Eight Great Smarts. And we tend to put so much emphasis on, you know, the smart kid. And we think of the smart kid as the academically gifted kid.
Right.
And you know, I do have a house full of smart kids, but there's, I mean, but I also know so many teenagers that I absolutely love and adore who wouldn't put themselves in that category or whose parents wouldn't put them in that category, but are so smart in other ways.
Yes.
And her book is just delightful, enlightening how every person that God created is smart, just in different ways. The Western world puts a huge emphasis on academic giftedness, but
Yep.
that's not the only place where God gifts us. There
Amen.
are other places where he gifts us. And so I guess I would just encourage people to read that in order to encourage their gifted kids to understand you're not all that. Like,
Right.
God, yes, God gave you this gift, but that doesn't mean you're the top of the heap, you know.
Right.
There are these other giftednesses too, is that a word?
Yes.
That are
Yes.
just as valuable in the kingdom of God, and we need to remember that to keep us humble. And for those who feel low, they feel like I can never measure up,
Mhm.
I'll always be in that person's, you know, shadow.
Shadow. Yep.
You don't need to feel that way. God doesn't want you to feel that way. He wants you to know that you are gifted in the way that he gifted you,
Yes.
whether it's with people, with words, with what were some of the other ones? I don't remember them
Yeah.
all,
Oh,
but
yeah.
so
People,
many different ways
words,
you can be
art.
smart.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I love that she had one that talked about people because I
yeah,
have a kid like that.
yeah.
Like they just bring people together. They could
People smart.
read
Yeah,
people. They know, what they might be thinking, how they might be hurting, uncomfortable.
right.
And I mean, that's great for someone who wants
Hmm.
to like do FBI or CIA work and
Absolutely.
like read body language
Yeah.
all day long,
And
or
that's more me. Like, I'm not academically gifted. I never scored high on those standardized tests. I mean, I got pretty good grades, but I was not one of those kids that you would put up on this, pedestal of academic giftedness. So I enjoyed reading that book for myself
right.
because I think, oh wow, I did, even though I don't measure up to even where my kids are. Like, my
Right.
kids are smarter than I am.
Right.
I do have these other skills over here that God gave me. So
And I
yeah,
like that you said that too, because like sometimes people will say, well, how did you even teach a kid that's
yeah,
like smarter than you? And it's like, well, they kind of teach themselves. You
they
give them
do.
the resources and the help.
They do.
And, or like you said, the idea of another mentor, even if it's
Hmm.
something like speech and debate, because you're giving them that challenge. And then there's other people speaking into their lives that,
Right.
because we have one friend that I'm like, she's super smart.
Hmm. Yeah,
And I'm like, I'm not there, but I'm gonna find my way. And then at some point, it's okay for me to be capped out,
that's right.
like,
Absolutely.
but I can organize,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like,
Well, this is what I do with debate every year. Everyone thinks I'm all these moms think I'm super smart because I
yeah,
coach debate. And I'm like, you have no idea how dumb I am. I do not understand debate a lot of times, but I am the cheerleader
Mhm.
and I help the kids with the basics to get launched and then they just do it themselves.
Right,
They take off and by this time of the year, October, they're well beyond me in the understanding of the debate resolution. And I'm happy for them to be like, that's great. You go fly, little bird.
right,
And they just take off and do it themselves. And I'm there as a support if they need me. And if I don't know the answer, I call my son.
right,
What do I answer this kid about this debate resolution?
right.
And so that's just what we have to do is use the resources around us and help to launch them and let them fly on their own.
And that's really what God provides in community is when you feel inadequate, I feel some way. Either his Holy Spirit will enlighten you and guide you and you will find the answer yourself, you will be forced to grow yourself,
Hmm.
or you will use the resources of people that he has
Yep.
given you in your life to do it.
Hmm.
And I'm glad you brought up Kathy Cook's book because it's actually really good. Like my daughter felt like, well, I'm not like book smart, I'm not
Hmm.
this smart, and I'm like, well, that's okay because all the art stuff that you love and
Hmm.
the music you produce and the books, like, what do people spend most of their money on? Being entertained.
That's right.
It's like, you're okay.
That's right.
Like the highest paid people are the ones who entertain us.
That's
So
so true.
you're going to be all right,
Yeah.
And, then we have another son, which, because you touched on the trades, like that is a whole other side of, intelligence, because when people are very, is it tactile,
Hmm.
but they're still critical. Like a lot of people don't think that when you have an HVAC service person that
Hmm.
comes to your home, they're looking at your air conditioner, like they're problem solving
Hmm.
constantly, the design of the system, how the
Right.
system works, your house, your square footage,
Hmm.
and then they have to do a ton of math,
Hmm.
not a
Yeah.
ton. I'm not going to freak out a bunch of people,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
some basic math needs to
Calculating
be done.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, measuring, calculating. And then they have to have good people skills to
Hmm.
be in someone's home and how they carry
Yeah.
themselves. So
Hmm.
even in those jobs that can be very lucrative and
Hmm.
provide for a family, should not be overshadowed
Hmm.
as like not
Less
great,
than.
less
Right.
than, right?
Exactly.
Because I mean, blue collars and white collars are essential, and
Right.
we saw that the trades did not shut down during the
Right.
pandemic. And
Yes. But like nursing, like my daughter needed to go
yes,
for nursing because you can't do.
yeah,
But that's you don't even necessarily need to go to college for a nursing degree anymore. You can just go get a 2-year degree for to be a nurse. Um, So
right,
yeah,
yeah,
I think there's so much value in that, and especially as artificial intelligence grows, a lot of the
yes,
jobs are going to disappear, but the trades will not.
right.
Those will not.
I have well, we have a mutual friend whose daughter went to a career field trip that we planned for dentistry,
Hmm.
and she's making great money, and she went
Yeah,
to school for 3 months.
yeah,
For
it's
like a
amazing.
quick trade school,
Right.
like no
Yep.
debt, went
Yeah.
to it, and she's been growing and doing great in it. And she was into cosmetology and like makeup and looking at like
Yeah.
art.
Yeah.
And now she realized, oh well, dentistry is a form of art.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it really is. And
Yeah.
some of, if she wants to pursue more, she has a place that will pay for her education to continue on in it.
Right.
And that would be college
Hmm.
needed. But then there's this other part where it's like you can use those little gifts because she, was like, oh, I'm not an academic and I don't want to be. And
Yeah.
like, I'm a like artsy person, and
Right.
the Lord help hone her into the part where, like, make people's teeth pretty,
Yeah, yeah.
and clean and healthy. and
Yes,
and it's like, it's amazing how, something of who you are comes out in the work that God has for you and that you're currently in.
right.
So yeah, I'm glad that you touched on those two books. So again, it was a Thomas Jefferson Education,
You're right.
and then the eight
The
intelli-
8 Great
it's the
Smarts
eight
by
great
Kathy
smarts.
Cook, yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for
You're
sharing
welcome.
with me all day today, and
Yeah.
taking your time to share with us. I hope that this has been an encouragement to you guys about talking about a gifted child. I pray that this is a blessing to you. And until next time, we'll see you later.